Amanda, you're muted if you're.
Hey, how are you guys?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Jesse, what's your background?
It's kind of a funny story. I threw it up there last second before I saw Bradley yesterday because I wanted to have like a blurred change of background. But this is from the event I was at last weekend.
Yeah, I recognize your picture now. It's fun.
Is it? It's still, to me it looks like it's not facing the right way, but apparently to Bradley and you, it's like you can read the letters and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Take your word for it. It's kind of funny, but it's also it's interesting. Whenever I see myself at the background of it, I don't know. It's amusing to me in different ways. But yeah. How's everyone today?
Good.
Pretty good.
I think. What's that?
I just said it's starting to get a little cold here.
Oh yeah.
It's warm again, but I said it's sort of like I said to someone today. It feels like a warm goodbye hug because it's not. It's gonna. And it's wild to me that it's like 70 right now, and I know it's coming. So, it's really pleasant today in Boston, and I just know it's. I think even tomorrow it's gonna be like, yeah, it's going down. Anyway, so just as a recap, and I'm gonna try to do the streaming thing again. I've been recording it away, but I don't know if streaming's gonna work or not. I'll give it a try. Before I do that, we didn't really have a meeting yesterday. Just to say that we did a lot of like lab admin and project admin stuff about the future, which I really appreciate. We ended up taking kind of the whole time just to talk about that, which I didn't expect, but I kind of aired some of my thoughts and feelings about what's next and what I want to do and things to do in the lab and nothing really. I don't. It sounds almost like silly, but nothing concretely new to say yet, other than it kind of feels like the same old thing. Like, well, there's certain projects I want to do, but it's up to me to build them out and kind of update and invite and make structure that other people can join or not. It's kind of the short version of it, which is the same as always. But I have a lot more clear plans that I'm really gonna focus a little bit less on some things, and try to be a little more concentrated in my scope. Like I really like some things with the society ethics tech team. I wish I could kind of spend more time in the explainability and interpretability space, and then some of like the ethical legal conundrums around that. But I don't. Right now, I feel really pulled towards some other stuff. And like condition features is kind of what that is, but just sort of like adjacent things in that whole space. So nothing, nothing that we talk about regularly is going to really fall away. But I'm just noticing between, finally courses are here, and that's a limiter on things for me in grad school. But also just there's some stuff I really want to push forward as well, like regardless of grad school. It's like, okay, I want to push this stuff forward, and I'm not going to be pushing things forward and like the Chimnitzer Bruce stuff or like all that really important stuff that I care about, but I'm not going to be able to do it. So that's kind of been on my mind a lot. Yeah, and that's kind of my. I guess I should share the screen here. So a little bit of something. Yeah, my update is basically along those lines. Oops, let's scroll here. Anything you guys want to say is sort of updates to stuff?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so. My work's been good, but I've been busier with that than usual. So
Also, I saw that if we have time and desire, there's things I can say about my paper and stuff for the other thing, but it's not urgent. I did revise a little bit of my outlook for it, but I'm not. I don't really want to sit on that today, and I know we typically only have an hour here, so if it comes to it, that's fine. If not, I'm not concerned about it. But I will talk about it Saturday, potentially, uh, if that's a better thing to do then. So as far as this chapter X goes, how about that unexpected brain vehicle sort of reference coming up here? It was
oh
basically
yeah,
moth and the bed bug,
I was gonna ask about that.
robo taxis, and like, okay, that's funny. I don't know if you want to jump into anything that you've started with here, Amanda, or how do you want to begin that?
We can just start from the beginning. I guess he pretty quickly gets into the um Parkinson's
Yeah,
example of like biological feedback. I thought that was very interesting. Um,
I was a little. I'm trying to remember how did he get right into it? I devoted the last chapter to the problem of industrial social impact on certain control machines. Okay, replacement human labor. However, there are a variety of problems concerning automata which have nothing to do with our factory system, but serve either to illustrate and throw light on the possibilities of communicative mechanisms in general, or for semi-medical purposes, for the prosthesis and replacement of human functions which have been lost or weakened. Okay, so he kind of just, I'm trying to recall because it's like, okay, immediately into this Parkinsonism, and the sort of feedback mechanism there, I guess. Arturo Rosenbluth, Bigelow, uh, the intention tremor, and then versus Parkinsonianism. I guess he just goes into the bio feedback. Um,
I guess the part that I thought was particularly interesting was when he described intention tremors as he talks about like amplitude somewhere. Let me find it.
amplification of botched feedback.
Yes.
That's what you got.
Yeah. So there's like this overcompensation or something. Um, yeah, I just for some reason I thought that was a really interesting description of this like malfunction. Like it seemed to
Oops.
divide our mental capacities into like these two parts. Um, maybe in a way that like predictive processing kind of does. Um,
I'm going to attempt to start the live stream, by the way, just to see if it does it or not. But Apple might.
Live streaming is on.
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting. You were saying about the overcompensation.
yeah, so these intention tremors, like the type of kind of malfunction that they are, is a malfunction in feedback. It's like there's too much of an amplification of the signal so that effective like motion isn't possible. Because it talks about how like in some situations you don't get this tremor. I was like reading something else about this at the same time, so I can't remember maybe I'm talking about the other thing I was looking at. But yes, okay, postural feedback. I read that like Parkinson himself said that a sudden like reposturing, a sudden change in posture of a person with Parkinson's can temporarily like stop the tremors. Like the mechanism being this like full body, full brain reorganization. And it's only a temporary stop in the tremors. But yeah, I don't know.
It's like the riding the bicycle
I
thing,
find
right?
it so interesting.
Yeah, like where did Norbert mention that last time? I feel like I just saw something about that. Did you mention that, Bradley, again in the we talked about that recently. So
Well, yeah, we've talked about postural dynamics. I mean, basically, you can, if you're standing, and I think we talked about like where if you're standing still and you stand on a pressure plate, you can measure these oscillations in posture. So you're constantly moving back and forth and side to side to sort of, your muscles are active, and there's some output of postural sway. So you maintain your sway over like what kind of looks like Brownian motion around the center point. And then if you have Parkinson's disease or some other disorder, that those basically what happens is you're standing there and your muscles kind of twitch and you're moving around a center, your point of mass. In those kind of disorders, you're not regulating that, so it's kind of like you're swaying too far in one direction or another, and it's very irregular. And so you can draw dynamical systems uh, like an attractor map of that, and it kind of looks like it goes all over the place. And your capacity for falling down, of course, increases with that sway. So usually healthy people have like they have a postural sway, but it's maintained around a center of mass very tightly. If you have a movement disorder, you can like kind of wobble back and forth, and eventually, you can fall down or worse. Now you can readjust your posture so that you can reset. I guess. I mean that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I mean that's where we talked about it.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, so it's like there's a feedback system that's involved in trying to stay still. Like if you're trying to stand still, there's that wobble.
Yeah.
And it seems like in my impression of how Weiner talks about it is in Parkinson's disease, it's when you're trying to stay still that the tremor is worse because the kind of feedback involved in keeping you still, when that's like over amplified, you get this wobble with a tremor. And that's why, pursuit of a goal, goal oriented motion, or just like like a full body motion, that explains why that can like temporarily alleviate the tremors.
Yeah.
Like a difference between the feedback that's involved in staying still and the feedback that's involved in reaching for a glass of water.
Yeah. There's this other idea back from the 1960s about feedback being explosive. So feedback isn't regulated. I mean, if it's just kind of like what we might call runaway positive feedback, it can be explosive, meaning it can just kind of be kind of an explosion of activity as opposed to something that's controlled. So when you see something that's controlled that's a product of positive feedback, it's usually that, there's some other mechanism in there that's sort of dampening it at critical times. And so you get this sort of feedback where it's actually able to maintain itself. Otherwise, if you have unrestrained positive feedback, it can be explosive. And if you dampen your system too much, it can become just kind of like basically dead, I guess, around a center point. It's kind of my understanding of that. Yeah.
If fun to tease apart parallels between that and like the bacterial growth.
Oh yeah.
Curve. So I think about that a lot in the context here of like almost like environment that affords positive feedback could be run away, but then it just going, and then like it exhausts it.
Yeah.
Like that's something note to self, like what Bradley said and what I just said, and some there's something about that, and like a core thrust of a major project I want to work on is about, I don't know what to call it right now, than like systemic exhausts, or like the way the resources of the environment are used, and what sort of, is it regulatory or is it like countering what happens to the exhaust? But that's a little too tangential right now.
Well, I mean, like counter means like, basically, if you look at a lot of brain circuits, there's a lot of like, there's a sort of positive feedback, but there's also like where you go from one neuron to another, and the neuron is inhibitory in the sense that it takes the input and dampens it. So you have these inhibitory connections along with excitatory connections. So when you have a seizure, it's where there's this cascade of excitatory neuronal activity instead of having inhibitory neuronal activity interspersed with it. So that's something that isn't normal. Usually a seizure is just like one of these cascades of excitatory behavior. Everything gets excited at once. So it always is that balance. And you have these sort of counter elements in there that kind of dampen things down critically. Not universally, but just kind of at critical times.
So going on from Parkinsonism, we'll get to the moth and the pig, but I don't know if you saw that part, Bradley, but it was kind of like right out of, I don't know if Bradenberg references this or not, or like who kind of talk from each other, but it basically talked about little like phototaxis and.
Oh yeah. Where is that section exactly?
It kind of starts 165, I guess.
Yeah.
The two principal modes of action, one of which is positively phototropic, it searches for light, and the other which is, negatively phototropic, it runs away from light. Moth and the bedbug, or what would be like love and hate or something like that. He kind of talks about that for a while, and nothing we don't really already know, but it's.
I see. It gets into where you have these sort of mutual feedbacks or counter feedbacks. So the positioning mechanism for the rudder contains a second feedback, which may be considered as postural. So that's where you get this postural control. It's just like countering some positive feedback with maybe like negative feedback, or negative feedback isn't really the right word, but basically so that they're sort of they're like mutually regulating. Maybe that's the word. And so, yeah, this is where you get into like if you have these very simple sort of taxic behaviors, and it could be like chemotaxis or phototaxis. That it's sort of a tendency to go in that direction, and that's the simple behavior. And then the more complex behaviors are where you have these other mechanisms that sort of regulate that. So if you have like multiple tropisms, or if you have different types of, if you have a circuit of any complexity, you're going to have this sort of counter behavior, or these rivalry behaviors. You'll see that in binocular rivalry, where you have two eyes and they're coming in and they're kind of regulating the common part of the visual field. So, you have the formation of inhibitory zones and zones that are actually, they're mutually inhibiting, and zones that are not inhibited. So, I mean, there are all sorts of things when you get like if you go into a Bradenberg vehicle, if you get certain circuit sizes beyond a certain size, that you get these kind of more complex behaviors arising from very simple sets of stimuli. Looks like Gray Walter's mentioned here too.
Yeah, he gets. Do you know him? I forgot what
Well,
he's like about.
He was one of the people, if you remember, Claude Shannon built this mouse, the Theseus robot, and Gray Walter was in like kind of in that same space. He would build these little, I guess, insect machines or something. I can't remember, but he was really into building these kind of biomimetic robots back at the time when Claude Shannon was doing the same. So.
Oh, we got Shannon in here.
He mentions Shannon. He mentions Walter's machines. He says that the tropism machines. The United States Army Medical Corps has taken photographs of the moth to compare with photographs of actual cases of nervous tremor. That's interesting.
Interesting line here too. We've included features other than inverse feedback, which gives us an explanatory and ethical attitude to the universe, as well as a purely tropistic one. I wonder what ethical means here. The moth and Dr. Walter's further development. Yeah. What Amanda just said. I kind of wish like Norbert in the book included like more subheaders, because I feel like there'd be a subheader here. Like there's a second class of machines.
Yeah, he could have divided this chapter into, I made a short list, like 4 different machines. So you have the moth and the bedbug as one. And then you have, the next thing is this hearing glove. Or I guess that would exemplify this group of machines that could aid when someone's senses aren't, there's a deficit in one or more sense. So the hearing glove is what translates sound into touch. I like how you screenshotted the notes page instead of.
I just did it the easy way. Oh my god, I've had the worst and most awkwardly interrupted sleep in the last like 5 to 6 days. So I'm just kind of.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Posting. So yeah, I'm taking all the shortcuts today.
Yeah. So. Oh, I meant to look up exactly how the vocoder works. Because that was another thing in this second class of machines.
Vocoder, yeah. What is that? Let's see. A vocoder, speech coding that analyzes and synthesizes the human voice signal for it, like an early like voice recorder, or just
speech synthesizer, like the thing that they use to simulate someone's voice when they can't speak.
Like
very, yeah.
Okay. 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 Levine. It's a distant relative to Michael Levin, I'm sure. Our Department of Psychology.
I don't know where he was at the time.
Yeah, interesting.
I like that he brought up these different aspects of speech again. I forget exactly. I feel like he used particular terms the last time he talked about this. But you have the translation of like the thing from the environment into meaning or into something symbolic, and then you have the translation of the symbols into our meaning, our understanding of the meaning. And so this hearing glove is supposed to show how like that middle stage, there's something kind of arbitrary about it, and there could be multiple paths to from the same point A to point B.
Mhm. Actually,
There's something analogous, I think, in other like I'm thinking of didn't they train like monkeys to use some kind of device? I'm imagining this like experiment where they somehow handicapped the monkeys, and then the monkeys very quickly learned how to use a device that like translated information from the environment into something meaningful. I can't remember the details, but I know it was like a motor control thing. So it wasn't linguistic, like in Weiner's example. It was like a robot arm or something. So the thing, so the deaf person is missing the sense of hearing. And then in this experiment, what was missing was, I wish I could remember the details. That would help me explain the similarity I'm seeing. Anyways, I think there's like something analogous here in multiple areas of cognition where there's like multiple paths to the same outcome. And if you like disable this middle step, it can be replaced by something else. And with proper like feedback, you can learn how to use these tools.
yeah, I think you said it here something like, I don't know if it's in this quote right now or not, but like how much more like for a deaf person this sight is more important in this, and I think what he meant is like because it's the feedback like weight like allocation of feedback like opportunities is greater. There's not audio feedback. There's not audible feedback or audio feedback.
Right. I guess I'm thinking of like brain computer interfaces in general. Like if you have the right amount of feedback, these tools you can learn how to use these tools.
Well, and that's actually two things. I'm not sure how to really break these down very well. But the Princeton Vision cyborg thing is like basically directly from what you were saying was they were the cyborg stuff was someone was experimenting with making new sensory inputs and it kind of focused on senses, but it was also the interesting part was sort of this uh, I think a much more accurate take of what they were trying to do is exactly what you said, but it wasn't. And not that the Princeton Vision Tracker couldn't have gotten that, but like I think actually a much more clear sense of what they were trying to do is not so much interpreting it was kind of labeled as making any sense, or like, oh, I like one of the persons, I forget, they were sort of a 2 year in a row thing. One of them was like Neil Harbison, who was right, this guy, he's trans-species, world's first cyborg artist. His antenna sends audible vibration through his skull to report information to him. Electromagnetic stuff, Wi-Fi enabled antenna. He was at Princeton Vision. Color antenna here, solar crown. There was also like, you know, I'm gonna put this here. Name. But I think um, I think I think this is actually an interesting way of thinking about what actually is going on there. Sort of like what there's in almost, I don't know if it's really fair to say informational sense, but in a control regulatory sense, there's kind of I want to call this like channels, I guess, but I don't know. I'm sure there's some actual terminology for this in like controller communication or signal theory or something, but like it's less about the channels or making new. Like part of it is making new like avenues for input, but there's also sort of like a finite space of feedback, or like not, I don't want to say feedback, but like actual information that the channels can convey, and swapping out or augmenting or changing the source of the input can lead to different things, but it's still sort of like I don't know. I don't really know what to say. My words are not coming out here, but there's something really interesting I'm trying to say.
Like we only have the senses that we have, but there are other ways of like encoding information and transmitting it through those senses.
Yeah. And on like there's sort of like there's almost an arbitrary amount of potential. I don't really want to say sensory inputs because that feels a little willy-nilly, but there's a non-arbitrary amount of like it's still only 100% of is the signal being interpreted as yes or no or more or less. Like the capacity of what the sensory input is telling or advising or influencing is still, I don't know, like I don't want to say discrete, but like there's like only like whatever the format of the signal is, the information maybe is, I don't know the right word to say, whatever the channel of the feedback's message has a certain like amount of signal or noise or clarity or like positive or negative. And I think that's an interesting disparity between the things. There's something I really want to write down about that, but I don't know what it is. Uh, something like that. Maybe I can bridge more to it from the if dogs could talk thing. And I feel like an interesting like juxtaposition to this conversation is, and I said this many times, the oh man, I can't find it. Like the dog that sort of trained to press the buttons on the ground and communicate. Like the human presses, oh look, like outside, like want to go outside or whatever, and the dog will be like, oh yeah, I want to go outside. Like it will press the buttons on the ground, even if they're just not the sense that the the dog understands language, but the sense that the dog has a recognition of this sound indicates this idea, this concept, or whatever. In a sense of getting around, what's interesting to me about it is like I'm very convinced, and there was sort of a debate when I was visiting a friend a long time ago about this because I was saying, oh yeah, like to me it's super clear that the dog would communicate, especially some of the more sociable dogs. I mean, the person's dog was really, really obviously to me like hyper socially aware, very, very socially vigilant, and very referencing all like who's looking at what cues, all this like like heavy social cognition stuff happening. But one of the other persons there was basically saying, "Oh, this dog wouldn't survive in the wild. They're kind of dumb, or they don't know how to do things. They're not tough or aggressive." And I was like, "Well, the first like questioning the capacity of the animal to really do anything or be anything because it wasn't initially acting like a big brutish dog, perhaps." And it led to discussion about, I think this dog would communicate a lot if it had the same means to communicate. Like it even in its current sensory setup, it's getting quite a lot of stuff. It just has a very limited means of outputting and engaging in the dialogue process. So I guess what I'm getting at here is uh, because I guess it's like in this case to me it's really clear the dog um, is very aware and doing like serious calculations. I remember saying to uh, um, it was really clear to me that the dog was basically heavily referencing and choosing like there was some serious metacognition going on about I want to convey this, I don't want to convey this, I'm going to reference this, I'm not going to reference this. And I feel like just because um, there's not a speech aspect of that to like confirm and announce those things, like I don't know, I could tell that was going on. So anyway, I think we're drifted a bit, but yeah. Anything we want to say also about BCI and feedbacks, things like that?
No. Yeah, let's go through the last two machines. Or types of machine, I guess.
Chess player and gouverneur.
Yeah. Right. They could kind of be combined into one class, maybe, because my impression was that these are decision-making machines. They're like game players, literally in the case of the chess player, but maybe figuratively in the case of like this political governor machine. It's like you give them rules and they do the optimal thing based off of the rules and the situation. Maybe that's too general though. There's probably like nuance we could dig into.
Sorry, I think we might have lost some I just got this thing that the live streaming didn't happen, so oh well.
Yeah, I saw that too.
I'll just record it otherwise. Yeah, okay, so where does the chess one start? I'm missing that here.
175.
Okay, next page.
Live streaming has stopped.
Thanks.
We now come to another class of machines which possess some very similar abilities. Curiously enough, this class contains the automatic chess playing machine.
Okay. Yeah. Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton, which is directly related to Princeton Vision, blah blah. Okay. Shannon.
And it talks about different ways a chess machine could learn.
Yeah. Well, I think he was pretty much right about this. Like, I assume all of the things we talked about in the last, 20 years are the learning, deep learning. Uh, Interesting. Would you say would it be fair to say this is essentially like training the deep learning model?
Injudicious choices, I guess. I mean, you could sort of train it to generate porn all day, I guess. And that would be
Or
sort of
just like pit it against a wide variety of good chess players.
well, that would be the ideal use case, but like you could do other things with it, I guess is the point.
The reader may wonder why we're interested in chess playing machines at all. Let's find out why we're interested in that. They are not merely another harmless little vanity by which experts design to seek to show their proficiency. As an honest man, I don't know what the end of the sentence is, but this is great. As an honest man, I cannot deny a certain element of ostentatious narcissism is present in me, at least respect, however. However, you will soon see is not only the only element active here, nor is it that which of the greatest importance to the non-professional reader. Mr. Shannon has presented some reasons why his researches may be of more importance than the mere design of curiosity, interesting only those who are playing the game. Among the possibilities suggest machine would be the first step in construction of a machine to evaluate military situations and determine the best move at a specific stage.
So they were building machines for what was then like post-war effort, but that was the sort of the history or the sort of the culture that a lot of this that computation came out of. Remember that you had von Neumann and you had Turing, and they were both working on in a military context.
If your computer science and your AI isn't helping with the contemporary warfare or the economic or the research warfare, it's only so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's an interesting point about AI that like we think about it in terms of certain endpoint use cases. Like, what do we want to use the AI for? We want to use it. I mean, a lot of the early AI was to build strategic games, and then of course, if you watch the movie War Games, you see why that's important. You train a machine on just some simple games, and it teaches it how to win nuclear war or win an unwinnable scenario in warfare. I mean, that was the whole lesson of that movie, or one of the some lessons, I guess. And then that's what like where they're coming from on that. Now, people who use like AI to make interesting pictures, I mean, that's kind of a newer use case, but that's I guess it's just kind of like if you open source it, what are people going to use it for? So, we started out with a lot of these military applications. We started out with like, applying it to like planning economies and other things. And now, we're using it for things that are maybe more recreational, or it's kind of interesting to think about like, what is that? What are the implications for like the design of an AI? I mean, like if you were to say, I want to create something just for making like sorting through data, you might come up with something like modern machine learning. But if you want to do something like simulate warfare or simulate some sort of like management thing, you might come up with a more a game oriented machine or like a strategic oriented machine. So it's kind of interesting to think about like the design of the system compared to like what the sort of the priorities are for it.
I mean, and this is a very nice segue to highlight one of the things I want to get at in my paper about the minds analogies, and actually about this too, in a heavy like it's a stretch here, but I think there's a parallel argument to be made about analogies of the mind are kind of related to the same systemic backdrop. And I'm kind of getting at what do we call, like, what do we compromise? What constitutes a person or a mind, or like what are we saying that thing is? And I think one of the things I want to point out is basically the point Bradley just made. Not in the case of how do we developing an AI, but like how are we interpreting or classifying a person, their mind, the thing, the head thing. I don't know to call that yet. But, that's for later. No, I think that's I think that's a key thing, and I think that's I feel like why I really like the Theory and Reality book, which I'm going to use that to basically backdrop a lot of, well, not backdrop, but to I'm gonna heavily base some of my paper idea on the book, in that I think so much of there's so little like how we talk and teach and convey meaning and understanding about stuff so broadly is like we don't really talk about, there's like epistemic humility, but there's just the context and the the environment in which something emerged is sort of just like we don't we don't we don't really do well with that. It's not really been centered in a lot of the things, and like particularly how I've been taught about anything. But maybe I'm weird that way. But anyway, so I think we only have less than 10 minutes. Yeah, okay. Here's the governor one. And there's only like 5 pages left in the chapter. But how did they start this one here? Oh, is this still a quote from his thing?
Yeah, there's a really long excerpt.
Oh, this is a huge, okay, like page-long quote. This is all that guy, I think.
Pierre Dubarral. Okay, it's a review of Weiner's cybernetics book.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm just gonna
I'm taking notes to do in the annotated bibliography page.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So Dubarral's really long review. Human affairs. Can we even conceive of a state apparatus can review all the systems of political decisions? We may dream of the time when a machine governor may come to supply, whether good or evil, the present obvious inadequacy of the brain. The latter is concerned with the machinery and politics. So sort of this magical basically that which would afford the song IGY. It's like the song about dreaming about the future and like this magical government that affords like Star Trek and stuff. Intergenerational year, I think. Or like Donald Fagan or something.
Oh, Donald Fagan, yeah.
Yeah. The older song,
Yeah. There it is.
You probably that's more from your in the past stuff. Yeah, here we go. A just machine to make big decisions program by fellows with compassion and vision, and so on. Very much all this stuff and hyper transportation. So, but what's the girl's like conclusion here? Just like wouldn't it be nice? Like, wouldn't it be pretty to think so? Stuff. The lowers of the best world is something you need to dream of. Despite all this, it's not ready for here tomorrow. I guess he kind of gets a little bit like, we don't want to turn into a Leviathan. Okay, sure. Thoughts about that?
I thought the phrase so in the block quote still on page 180, kind of towards the middle. Deliberate and conscious primitive injustice may be the only possible condition for the statistical happiness of the masses. I thought the phrase statistical happiness was very interesting. And so that's in the excerpt. But then on the next page, Weiner says, let's see, 180 towards the bottom after Leviathan. A world worse than hell for every clear mind. Then the next page, when it's back to Weiner's writing, he says that like the danger of this machine wouldn't be that it has real power to like hurt us. It's that humans will use the machine, use its like results to control, to manipulate, to say, to like argue for a particular outcome, and to justify particular actions. So I thought that was interesting. I felt like finally in the text we get to the human use of
Mm.
human beings. Via machines. The dominance of the machine presupposes a society in the last stages of increasing entropy, where probability is negligible and where the statistical differences among individuals are nil. So, like, the type of governing that this hypothetical AI could do would not work well for like the real, set of human beings.
I wonder if Norbert ever commented directly on like Project Cybersign, or if he was like a little past. I forget when he passed away. Video games. We got talk about the communists, which is kind of what my block over here is about that. Yeah, he kind of gets into this. I was learning about the fatigability, like he considerable amount of evidence that rather in deeds than in words. So meaning like, how should we interpret the rather in deeds than in words part? There's a considerable amount of evidence, rather in deeds than in words, that the Russians have something of this attitude to the game, to the world game, by considering the psychological limits of the players and especially their fatigability as part of the game itself. And by this attitude, it means this sort of, I think, unlimited capabilities stuff. A sort of machine of Gouverneur is thus now essentially in operation, both sides of the world conflict, the Cold War, although it does not consist in either case of a single machine which makes policy, but rather of a mechanistic technique which is adapted to the exigencies of a machine-like group of men devoted to formation of policy. Anthropologist and philosopher. Yeah. The machine's a danger to society. It is not from the machine itself, but what man makes of it, but the underlying warnings of Butler. In 1, he conceives a machine that otherwise unable to act, conquering mankind by the use of men as subordinate organs. Nevertheless, we must not take Butler's foresight too seriously. In fact, at his time, neither he nor anyone around him could understand the true nature of the behavior of the automata, and his statement are rather incisive figures of speech than scientific remarks. Not sure what to make of this part about American know-how. Myths and fairy tales that we read to children were.
Yeah, he kind of lost me at this point.
Yeah, I didn't. I get we go into Prometheus soon.
Yeah.
And like, okay.
I did like the conclusion though, like the last 2 paragraphs. It's like 1 paragraph and a sentence.
Yeah, he kind of he goes hard in the paint, I guess.
On like the mechanization of society when the humans become cogs and the levers.
I like this part seems interesting too. I think it's kind of where he's getting of it too. I didn't see this part. I missed this before. That I've said that the modern man, especially the modern America, however much to know how, they may have very little know what. I think that's basically what he's trying to put up there, but come through. He'll accept the superior dexterity of the machine-made decisions without too much inquiry of the motives and the principle behind these. In doing so, he'll put himself sooner or later in the monkey's paw thing, and then he gets all literate and talks in this big literate training. monkey paw function. But yeah, then it gets to what we're saying here. This is the last. The hour's very late. I'm sure that's exactly what all along the Watchtower came directly from this book. I think so. We totally got that. There's a lot I could say about that, but I know we're over time. So, any concluding thoughts for this chapter?
I don't think so. We can. I want to dig into the end again because I felt like he kind of lost me, but I kind of want to go back to it. And then the next chapter is pretty short, and then the next meeting is that's the last chapter. So the next meeting is our last one.
Okay, well let's pick up with the last, go to the last couple pages of this book. 80, I don't know, 5 maybe. Cool. Yeah, I like to kind of, have some thoughts about that too. I think there's something there, and Norbert's a little poetic about some things here, but yeah. Okay. Maybe we can start thinking about a next book, or where we want to go after this too. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit on Saturday too. But I can on Saturday I'll go over a little bit of this here. I kind of define a little bit of my stuff more and change a little bit, but to be continued. Anything else for today though? That's it. Okay, well, we're moving along. It's been really fun to read this, and thank you all for joining in today. Appreciate it. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you later.
Sorry.